In today's world, influence functions as currency. Yet most people aren't even aware of what they're spending. In their pursuit of attention, they forfeit control. They aim to persuade and end up being overlooked. They strive to dominate only to become invisible, because real power today doesn't resemble noise, it resembles strategic silence. It looks like the one who never posts but somehow shapes everyone's behavior. While you're reacting and striving to be noticed, someone else is quietly reshaping reality without ever making a sound. These individuals don't play by the rules, they create them. They don't chase influence. They engineer the system that defines it. This isn't instinct, it's method. These are strategies refined over centuries, sharpened by one of history's most calculating minds. His goal wasn't to uplift, it was to control. His name, Machiavelli. If he lived now, he wouldn't be found in online debates or motivational stages. He'd be unseen, intangible, unreachable, yet pulling strings through whispers, through patterns, through behavior that can't be traced back to him. These are the psychological blueprints Machiavelli would deploy to manipulate anyone, regardless of their status, strength, or awareness. This isn't abstract theory, it's the framework of control. He understood that the weak fail when they try to force change in behavior. Instead, he'd target the mind. Once you're inside their thoughts, everything else follows. He'd plant a subtle idea and vanish. Something like, ever notice how the fastest movers tend to be the least afraid? That's not advice, it's a mental trigger. Now, whenever they hesitate, they'll act not because you instructed them, but because the notion feels like their own. This reshapes identity. You don't push people, you make them believe they were already headed that way. Machiavelli would also disarm with warmth, deploying charm as a calculated facade. Knowing people distrust coldness, he'd appear personable, smiling in meetings, praising opponents, laughing at just the right time. But it would all be performance, not sincerity. Once perceived as non-threatening, people open up. They talk more, trust more, expose more, and that's when the subtle influence begins. A single phrase reframes the entire discussion. A soft nudge redirects their focus. A seemingly innocent question secures your position. Today's manipulation isn't loud, it's precise, delicate, and hidden beneath friendliness. While others force their way in, Machiavelli would lead through ease and strike below the surface. He'd build a rhythm, a sense of certainty, then shatter it. Because people don't fear what they understand. They fear what's unpredictable. And fear, when it's pure, becomes respect. So you start by being reliable, approachable, clear, responsive. You ease their guard. Then, without warning, you shift a delayed reply, a briefer message, a cooler tone. No explanation. Suddenly, they're unsettled not because you wronged them, but because you've become unfamiliar. And in that space between who they thought you were and who you're becoming, influence begins to grow. They lean in, try harder, reflect, chase a version of you that never actually existed. Machiavelli didn't dominate through force. He engineered emotional instability and allowed his targets to fix it themselves. Even more, he made himself essential then disappeared. People crave consistency, so offer them what no one else can. Solve an invisible problem. Provide clarity when confusion reigns. Make them feel secure in chaos. And annex it, not with cruelty, but with grace. Now, in your absence, they feel the void. Not because they depended on you, because they got accustomed to you. And what once felt like strength becomes vulnerability when faced alone. Real power doesn't come from demanding attention. It comes from crafting a gap and becoming the only one capable of filling it. Machiavelli never handed out comfort. Freely, it was always timed. Once someone leaned in, he'd step back just enough to throw them off balance. He'd say something that altered how they saw themselves, because most people have no true sense of identity. They absorb what others reflect. Machiavelli, instead, reflected something deliberate. You're dangerous when you trust yourself. You're wiser than you let on. You don't owe anyone explanations anymore. Say it once, then go silent. Those words won't fade, they'll echo for days, months, even years. Because you didn't give them advice, you gave them a mirror, one that flatters, confronts, and redefines them. And now, every time they rise, your image follows. Every time they fall, they long to see themselves through your eyes again. That's not persuasion, it's psychological branding. Another strategy: keep your motives unclear and let them connect the dots. Certainty offers safety, but uncertainty breeds control. Machiavelli wouldn't spell out his intentions. He'd let others fill in the blanks. One day he'd be reassuring, the next distant. Warm in one moment, unreadable the next. Not from instability, but to keep them chasing. The mind obsesses over the undefined. You never explain the silence. You never justify your motives. The ambiguity does the work. People construct entire narratives trying to decode your inconsistency. They won't stop analyzing until they understand you. And if you're clever, they never will. Because confusion turns to fixation, and fixation turns to gravitational pull. You don't push them, you pull them into orbit. Every encounter becomes a psychological mark. Where most manipulators rely on logic and facts, Machiavelli leaned into emotion. Because details blur, names fade, but the way someone feels lingers. That's your leverage. To control someone, don't argue. Make them feel recognized, powerful, accepted even if it's a lie. Then walk away. Because the next time they feel ignored or weak, they'll recall the one moment they didn't you. Not because you were kind, but because you stood out. Most people leave behind sound. You left behind a sensation. And people return to whatever left the most lasting impact, even if it was illusion. Machiavelli would reflect their shadows before offering light. People trust what they recognize in you, not the version they project to the world, but the one they conceal. Machiavelli wouldn't engage with the persona. He'd speak directly to the shadow they suppress. You don't let people in easily. Neither do I. Weakness bothers you, that's what connects us. You've been overlooked your entire life. I can sense it in your silence. These aren't compliments, they're invitations. Now they don't just feel understood, they believe you're the only one who sees their hidden self. That's real intimacy. And once you offer that kind of closeness, you gain access. But you don't linger in their darkness. You guide them out gently, quietly, almost imperceptibly. You become the answer to the part of themselves they resent. And people don't abandon what heals them, even when the healing process hurts. Machiavelli wouldn't compete in the present. While others respond to win, he'd speak in echoes. He'd deliver a line that seems irrelevant now but cuts deep later. You'll understand soon why I chose silence. One day, what I didn't say will matter more than what I did. When it finally clicks, remember this moment. These aren't lessons or corrections. They're seeds. And as they grow, every mistake feels like something you foresaw. People follow those who feel prophetic. The less you speak, the more weight your words carry. You're not trying to shift the present, you're shaping their future reactions. He would break defenses by making them feel safe. Machiavelli didn't storm the walls. He convinced them there was no threat. You ask thoughtful questions. Never raise your voice. You agree more than challenge. You make them feel sharp, important, in charge. Let them believe they're in control. And as they grow comfortable, you gently steer them toward your outcome. And when they arrive, when they realize you guided them all along, they don't feel betrayed. They feel thankful. Because you never bruised their ego. People follow more readily when they think they're leading. You don't seek applause. You seek alignment. Machiavelli didn't chase credit. He became indispensable, quietly present in every outcome. His final move: incompleteness. People crave closure. They want clarity, finality, resolution. So don't give it to them. Machiavelli left messages unanswered, stories half told, conclusions floating in silence. Why? Because people obsess over the unfinished. They return to the gap. They overanalyze the quiet. They become consumed by what wasn't said. You only need to say, "There's more I could explain, but I won't." Or, "You'll figure it out on your own." Or, "Now's not the time, but soon You'll see. And suddenly they lean in. That leaning, that's power. You'll never have to chase them again. They'll follow the absence. Because nothing is more addictive than someone who made them feel almost whole yet left them needing just one final piece. So what comes after the tactics, after the strategy? What happens once you've laced their thoughts with silence, once you become the echo they can't escape? You don't have to speak anymore. They now advocate for you, adjust themselves for you, protect your absence. Not because you demanded it, but because you trained them to depend on your pull. Machiavelli understood this deeper than any strategist ever did. Real control doesn't end with action, it solidifies when the victim reshapes their identity around your absence. It starts with imbalance. They can't put their finger on it. Something just feels off. You used to be quicker to respond, more generous, more predictable. Now you're not. Not in anger, just in a way that forces them to question themselves. Did something change? Was it me? Why do I feel uneasy? And when there are no answers, they start to overcompensate, acting softer, more attentive, more vulnerable. Meanwhile, you remain calm because they're no longer reacting to who you are. They're chasing who you used to be. This is manipulation at its purest. You don't demand anything, they volunteer it. Then comes the shift in identity. Things get more dangerous now. They begin to change. Subtly, quietly. They adopt your tone, echo your logic, mirror your silences. Why? Because you've become their benchmark. They no longer act from instinct, they act according to how they think you judge them. Would he approve if I said this? She probably wouldn't like that response. I need to be more like them. They've absorbed your presence, even in your absence. And they don't call this control, they call it admiration. But it's not. It's submission disguised as growth, and you haven't uttered a word. Machiavelli would smile at this. Then comes the loop, the cycle you designed. They feel distance, they panic, they invest more. You remain calm, aloof, cold, but not too cold. You give just enough affection to keep them hooked. Then you withdraw again. But instead of leaving, they hold on tighter. Because they believe it's fixable, they just need to try harder. Say the right thing. Be better. That's not love. That's dependency. And you're not a partner anymore, you're a fix they keep chasing. As Machiavelli once said, men are motivated by two core forces, love and fear. And you've manufactured both. They cherish the way you once made them feel, and they dread never feeling it again. So they keep repeating the cycle, silently begging, pleasing through performance. And with every sacrifice they make, your power grows. Because the more they give, the less you have to. Eventually, this becomes emotional branding. When your presence carves itself into their psychology, they meet new people but compare them to you. They hear familiar phrases but only remember how you said it. They hesitate before acting because they wonder how you would have reacted. You're not just a memory now, you're a framework. Their mind has molded a space, specifically shaped like you, and everything else has to pass through it. This is the essence of emotional branding, not a tagline or a logo, but a psychological imprint. It's in how you made them feel, how you led them to doubt themselves, how you ignited their hunger for validation they could never quite earn. Now it's ingrained, and you haven't said a single word. Eventually, silent authority takes root. You stop texting, stop guiding, disappear entirely. Yet they still act like you're observing. They think using your cadence, speak with your timing, and pause in the spaces where your silence used to be. They search for your approval in others and feel unsettled when it doesn't resemble you. You've become a phantom with pull of presence that still shapes their days. And if they confront you, press for closure, or demand clarity, you give them nothing. Just as Machiavelli would. Because true power isn't demonstrated while you're present. It's measured by how much you still control after you've vanished. You've reprogrammed their thoughts, reshaped their responses, and stamped your signature into their emotional framework. But for Machiavelli, influence alone was never enough. He didn't want to be followed, he wanted to be obeyed. Not by coercion or brute force, but by invoking something more sinister, complicity. The kind that leads them to betray someone else just to stay in your favor, to lie to defend your name, to harm themselves rather than risk losing proximity to you. And the most brilliant part? They'll think it was entirely their choice. Because the greatest kind of dominance isn't admiration, it's the fear of losing the version of themselves you helped them become. The key is to let them compromise themselves for your sake. If you want control, don't ask for loyalty. Let them offer betrayal on their own. You never say, "Tell me what they said," or "Take my side," or "Keep this between us." Instead, you plant ideas with lines like, "I'm not asking you to choose. I trust you'll do what's right," or "You always know how to handle things like this." Now they take action. They lie, they defend you, they push someone else away, all without being asked. And once they cross that line, they're bound to you. Because guilt bonds more deeply than affection. Once they've betrayed someone else for your benefit, they can't afford to lose you. They won't want to because you hold too much. But more than that, they've already paid a price, and people protect what they've sacrificed to keep. Machiavelli would never be the one to swing the blade. When it's time to destroy someone's reputation, end a connection, or create conflict, you don't act, you guide. You ask subtle, venom-laced questions like, "Ever notice how he only shows up when it benefits him?" Or, "I'm not sure, but she seems different when you're not around." Or even, "Maybe I'm overthinking it. Just be cautious." And just like that, they start watching more closely, second-guessing everything, and gradually pulling away. You didn't accuse. You didn't force it. But the divide is already there. And when the relationship crumbles, they won't hold you responsible. They'll credit their own awakening. Meanwhile, you stay spotless, untouchable, and revered. This is mastery manipulating from the shadows, never appearing in the aftermath. Machiavelli would become the holder of their secrets. Because the more they confess to you, the more you own of them. You don't request confession, you simply listen with such composed attention, such patient curiosity, that the truth escapes on its own. And now, you're not just someone they trust. You're the only person who possesses that hidden part of them. As long as you carry it, you carry them not through threats, but through presence. Because even if you never mention it, they remember what you know. That awareness, your silence, keeps them loyal in a way fear never could. They don't want you to use it, but they know you could. And that shifts how they behave around you. They speak more carefully, step more gently, strive to remain in your favor. Because when people offer you their secrets, what they're really giving you is leverage. Machiavelli never had to reveal anyone's truth. He simply let them remember they gave it to him. He made loyalty feel exclusive and not transactional. While ordinary manipulators demand devotion, he would never need to. He'd treat loyalty as something rare, something selective, something earned not expected. And when people feel like they've gained access to something sacred, they guard it fiercely. You reward them subtly, maybe with a look only they understand, a rare word of praise, a shared reference no one else catches. You make them feel handpicked, not publicly, but quietly, intimately. And once someone believes they've been chosen, they start performing not to impress, but to keep their place. They won't risk losing their seat at your table because in their mind, you don't need them. That's the psychological imbalance you've created. They rely on you more than you rely on them, and they feel fortunate just to remain near. That's not influence, that's invisible hierarchy. Machiavelli would use guilt as a silent tether. Guilt doesn't always come with volume mates, often understated. All it takes is distance. You leave a message unanswered, delay your glance, seem slightly colder. They begin to wonder, did I mess up? Have I let them down? Did I lose their respect? You never need to confirm. The guilt does the work. They start to over-apologize, over-correct, reshape themselves just to recapture the version of you they think they've lost. That's the chain. They cross their own boundaries just to protect how you see them. They mold their identity to fit your comfort. They rehearse every sentence before speaking it, and they label it self-improvement. But it's not. It's surrender. Machiavelli wouldn't issue commands. He'd let people build their own prison just to remain worthy of his presence. He'd let the fear of losing him replace the desire to understand him. You don't need to be understood. What matters is being feared as a loss. You keep parts of yourself veiled. You give less than they seek. You show up inconsistently, but you always leave impact. So eventually, they stop asking for clarity, stop pushing for answers, stop demanding certainty, because they've realized that trying to decipher you only pushes you further away. And they'd rather live in confusion than be left alone. So they shift. They become more reserved, more careful, more compliant. They call it safety. But in reality, it's just internalized submission. Machiavelli didn't simply make people desire him, he made them fear the idea of life without him. That's how you know you've truly won. Not when they admire you, but when they diminish themselves just to remain within your glow. You've built their loyalty. You've seeded their self-doubt. You've conditioned how they feel. You've rewritten who they are. But there's still one final actone no one anticipates. You vanish, not out of spite, not as punishment, but with a silence so sharp it reframes their entire world. Because real Machiavellian control doesn't exist in what you do, while present it lives in the aftermath of your disappearance. That's how you become untouchable, not by staying in the game, but by transforming into the game itself. Leave without notice, no explanations, no final words, no dramatic exit, just stillness. Let them wonder if you're angry. Let them replay every word. Let them relive the exact second your tone shifted, searching for clues they missed. That's where the power intensifies, because humans obsess over what they can't understand. And now, you're not just gone, you've become their greatest unresolved mystery. They don't simply long for you, they begin reshaping themselves to lure back your absence. You're no longer a person. You're a question with emotional weight. This is control through withdrawal. Machiavelli understood a truth few ever grasp. Constant presence erodes reverence, only absence defines it. When you're always there, they learn to manage you. But when you remove yourself, they reorganize their lives in search of your echo. They speak softer, hoping you'll return. They act with more precision. On the off chance you're still watching, they make decisions based on your values because even your memory still dictates their behavior. That's when you've entered the highest echelon of psychological control, silent authority, where you influence not through voice or visibility, but through invisibility. Let others carry your story. You don't broadcast your legend, they do it for you. You leave behind impressions, vague rules, fragments of meaning that no one can quite trace to you directly, and yet they repeat it, warn about it, emulate what they imagine you would have done. You're no longer remembered, you're mythologized. You don't go viral, you linger. You don't convince, you echo. And in every room they step into, your presence arrives before they do. You hear them say things like, "He made me think before I spoke," or "She was unpredictable, and it kept everyone sharp," or "You never knew what he'd do next, but it always worked." You never had to demand respect. You engraved it into their minds. Machiavelli never asked to be quoted, yet here we are, still repeating his words centuries later. Become a symbol, not a person. The loudest winners fade the fastest. The ones who leave no mark are soon forgotten. But if you shed the identity of a person and become a standard, a principle, they can't replace you. You become the lens they use to judge others, the compass they follow when direction fails, the discomfort they feel when someone feels too familiar.